Good afternoon, colleagues. The first item of business is consideration of 4 Parliamentary Bureau motions: 268 on standing orders, temporary rule change; 269 on establishment of committees; 270 on names and remits of mandatory committees; and 273 on election of committee conveners. Can I ask any member who wishes to speak to the motion to press the request to speak button? Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I rise today not to oppose the formation of committees, but to challenge this Government over its latest attempt to undermine fair scrutiny of the decisions it takes. The SNP has chosen to nominate one of its own as convener of the Finance and Public Administration Committee and to take on the position of deputy convener. This is in contrast to last session, where an MSP from an opposition party took on the role of deputy. With a huge focus during this parliamentary term set to be on the Government's finances, it is sadly predictable that this secretive SNP government has grabbed those two vitally important positions. With MSPs quite rightly concerned about a £5 billion budget black hole, would it not have been better for the SNP to allow opposition politicians to lead the scrutiny of the Government's finances? Has John Swinney learnt no lessons from the SNP financial scandal about the importance of transparency and independent audit, about the separation of powers? Clearly not. They have learned no lessons. And who might emerge in these two key roles? In the last session, it was the presiding officer who was convener, who showed grit, determination and independence of mind from the SNP. But are the SNP about to propose a pair of party patsies to rubber stamp the SNP's budget in this Parliament? Will it be the eagle-eyed Colin Beattie, or perhaps will Kirsten Oswald be swapped from her ministerial brief? Two MSPs who apparently failed to spot £400,000 being stolen from under their noses. Presiding Officer, people will not be surprised that SNP ministers are trying to hijack the Finance Committee, but it flies in the face of one of the fundamental principles of this Parliament, that the committee system should be independent of government and should doggedly hold them to account. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Conservatives are in line to secure the convenership of the Social Justice, Housing and Local Government Committee, which will oversee 41% of this Government's expenditure. And we will use our presence on this committee to properly scrutinise the Scottish Government and its bloated SNP benefits bill. MSPs from all parties across this chamber were elected to this Parliament to question the Government and to safeguard their constituents' interests and the taxes they pay. But this power grab on the Finance Committee is akin to putting Dracula in charge of a blood bank. I therefore urge all MSPs, regardless of their party, to use the committee system which Parliament passes today to properly hold this Government to account. Ministers may be frightened of transparency and routinely seek to evade scrutiny, and they might not like this. But this is what we are paid to do on behalf of our constituents. While we will not stand in the way of the formation of committees today, the Scottish Conservatives are putting down a very strong marker before ministers. People have had enough of their secrecy. It's time to open the books.
Thank you, Mr Hoy. Minister to respond and move the 4 motions, please.
Well, let me move and let me first of all say, Crimea River from Craig Hoy. How desperate, how sad. No wonder they're there as a reduced rump, Presiding Officer. Mr Hoy has... Well, let me first of all say Bureau has spent the past few weeks discussing and agreeing committee remits and memberships. We've done so collaboratively, we've done so collegiately. We've done that together without rancour, without division. Yes, there's been debate, and as a result, these are the proposals before Parliament. The number of members from each party on committees is largely based on the Hunt calculations to try and ensure fairness across committees. That's been the method used since devolution. I would say, and the reason I say it's largely under the Hunt, there's actually one party that would be entitled to more committee places under the Hunt formula, and it would be the Scottish National Party under the Hunt formula. Under the Hunt formula, absolutely happy to give way to Mr Kerr.
Hear what the Minister for Parliamentary Business is saying about process, which is something the SNP love to obsess about. But this is about what it looks like. It's unseemly that both of the convenership roles in this vitally important committee are with the government party. Can he not see that this just stinks?
Well, there's another river that could be cried, President Officer, and I'll come to that very point in a minute. But the point I was going to make is that actually it's three committee places that would have been entitled to the Scottish National Party that have been given up. So Reform, Labour and the Conservatives are all getting an additional place across the committee structure that we're proposing today. And if anything, I could have been the person speaking against this motion, saying that I was terribly unfair, but I'm a very reasonable person, President Officer, so that's why I'm standing here proposing this. And I would remind members that the SNP has a minority on all committees, no matter whether it has a convenership or not. Any suggestion that the SNP group will somehow dominate a committee is clearly not true. Craig Hoy might not like this, but choices of committee convenership and deputy convenerships were based on the D'Hondt method. That is something that's been in place since the outset of this place being established. Indeed, there's only one party again that's been restricted from taking up any of those posts, and standing orders prescribe that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. The only party that's restricted from taking up any convenership is the Public Audit Committee. Everything else is to be legitimately allocated in line with the D'Hondt form. The business managers each made their choices, and this motion is based on those choices. Every single decision has been taken in line with the standing orders of this Parliament. And I hear, yeah, process. That's right. This is about the process. That's what this motion's about, Mr Kerr. It's about the process of establishing committees. I think you should be paying attention, Mr Kerr. And Mr Hoy, I know he's talking about what it was last session. He's only been here one session, so he's still quite new. He's still learning. He's still a lot to learn, as Mr Hoy. Because the Finance Publica appointments, the Finance Public Administration Committee, having the governing party convener is not new. Indeed, Labour held the convenerships in Session 1 and 2 and also had the deputy convenership in Session 1, and in Session 4 the Government Party had both the convenership, a very good convener I thought at the time, Presiding Officer, and also had the deputy convenership. So I'm afraid to say you can cry about it all you want. There's nothing new here, and Mr Hoy is talking about the committees that the Conservative Party are about to get the convenerships of. Well, I have to say, Mr Hoy, if you're speaking against and moving against this motion, about to vote against this motion, and if you're successful, you're not going to get those convenerships. I urge Parliament to vote for the motions today.
Thank you, Minister. And I think we're all agreed that the Finance Convener in the 4th and 6th session was excellent. The question is that motions 268, 269, 270 and 273 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are all agreed. And before we move on to general questions, I just want to talk about the election of conveners for a brief moment or two. The nomination period for conveners of committees is now open. Only members of the party designated with the convenership of a particular committee are eligible to be nominated as convener of that committee. To be valid, nominations must be proposed by the member of that party and seconded by a member of another party. The nomination period is open until 1 p.m. on Tuesday, and the election process will begin after time for reflection on Tuesday. And anyone who is interested in participating in the nomination process can obtain forms from the clerks in room P1.02, and the clerks can also advise on the procedure to be followed. The next item of business is general questions, and in order to get as many people in as possible, because we're already 9 minutes into this session, which I will allow to run on for some minutes to get as many people in, but I would really like short and succinct questions and answers to match. First question is Mary McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to curb vaping amongst young people.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government is taking action to tackle vaping amongst young people. We'll consult on the retail display of vapes within our first 100 days in government to remove the appeal and visibility of vapes to young people. Through the Tobacco and Vapes Act 2026, offences for free distribution and nominal pricing of vapes come into force on the 29th of October 26, and from 1st June 27, a comprehensive ban on advertising vapes will come into force, reducing young people's exposure to vape adverts. We're also taking forward substance use education work in our schools through Curriculum for Excellence. Young people learn about a variety of substances, including vapes, and information is available through Young Scot, Parent Club and NHS Inform.
Mary McNair.
I thank the Minister for that response. I recently met with one of my constituents to discuss her concerns about underage vaping, and we both agree that vapes should be stored as cigarettes are, with no colourful marking or flavours available to make them much less appealing. I'm aware of the cross-governmental work on this. Therefore, can the Minister give a progress update on this, and secondly touch on what more can be done to ensure vapes are not available to those who are underage? Minister.
So I share the concerns of your constituent, and I'm taking decisive action to tackle underage vaping and to prevent a new generation becoming addicted to nicotine. The Cross-Government Tobacco and Vapes Act was granted royal assent on the 29th of April, and that contains powers to regulate product features, packaging, ingredients and flavouring for vapes. We'll continue to work closely across the UK and the devolved governments on these matters. As referenced in my original answer, we'll consult on the retail display of vapes within 100 days in government. We're also working closely with the Society of Chief Officers of Trading Standards in Scotland to strengthen enforcement of existing legislation that bans the sale of vapes to those who are under 18, including checks on age of sale, alongside providing guidance and support to businesses.
Supplementary, David Linden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With flavours such as candy and sugar, it's indisputable that vapes are marketed towards children. And at Red Reaction Group in April, there was a concern expressed there that far too many of these are being targeted towards children. So can I ask the Scottish Government to consider a nationwide moratorium on new vape shops being established within a certain radius of education establishments? Minister.
So thanks very much for the question. Planning authorities and local authorities are able to regulate the development, including the creation of new shops, but changes to the specific range of goods that are sold within an existing shop don't constitute development, so they aren't within the scope of planning control. Scotland does, though, have a tobacco and vapes retail register, and all businesses need to be registered to be able to sell these products in Scotland. And it is the responsibility of local authorities to enforce compliance with the register in their local areas. So all of these products are already illegal to be sold to under 18s. The registration process means that illegality can be stamped out.
Question 2, David Barrett.
To ask the Scottish Government what action is being taken to bring forward the delivery of a new Lochgelly Health Centre before 2031.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, as announced in the Scottish Government's Infrastructure Delivery Pipeline 13th of January, an initial tranche of 12 primary care projects is being developed, including Lochgelly and Cowdenbeath. Work has already commenced on the development of a standardised approach to the service planning, design, procurement and construction for all 12 projects within the programme. This, of course, will take time. Our current planning assumption is that construction will start around 2031.
David Barrett.
Thank you for that response. I welcome the Scottish Government's commitment to delivering a new health centre in Lochgelly. The Cabinet Secretary will appreciate that my predecessor has been a fierce advocate for Lochgelly, and I am keen to ensure a health centre is delivered as soon as possible. However, it's also important that I make clear that there are concerns about the suggested expansion of the centre to include Cowdenbeath, and so can the Cabinet Secretary further advise how the Scottish Government is engaging with NHS Fife on the areas which the new medical centre will cover. She will also appreciate that my constituents are keen to ensure Lochgelly receives the health centre that is so critically needed. So would the Cabinet Secretary be willing to meet with me at the existing centre to hear their concerns?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, of course I'll be more than happy to meet with Mr Barrett and if I can reassure him that the Scottish Government is indeed engaging with NHS Fife and my expectation is that NHS Fife engage with the communities and MSPs in the area. Despite the financial challenge, we are developing a whole system NHS infrastructure plan and this includes the primary care investment programme and of course within that we've already confirmed Cowdenbeath and Lochgelly as a priority area. Now, Cowdenbeath is used in the context of the member's constituency geography rather than indicating a specific facility, and this reflects a place-based approach. But no decision has been taken at this stage on whether elements within priority areas will be progressed as single or separate projects, and this will be determined following service planning.
Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The issue that's been raised by Mr Barrett is about the coupling of Lochgelly Centre with Cowdenbeath and the concerns that will delay Lochgelly. Lochgelly is a shovel-ready project that people have waited a long time to see delivered and it is no longer meeting the needs of local people and the Government have known that for a while. Over a decade it has been since it's been identified they need a new centre. So when are they actually going to centre delivered? You're talking about maybe building starting in 2031 but it is over a decade people have been waiting.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it's important for me to inform the member, if she's not already aware, that in 2022 an outline business case for the replacement of Lochgelly Health Centre was submitted. However, and detailed feedback was provided. So it is crucial at this stage that we unlock these much needed projects. The infrastructure investment plan is key to that and these developments are absolutely crucial to expanding on primary and community care so that we can shift the balance of care from hospitals into the community so that it's actually nearer to people and meets their needs.
Question 3, Patrick Harvey.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to address harm caused by disinformation and conspiracy theories, including climate denial propaganda.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Climate change and its effects are real. Those who would undermine climate action do so in the face of all evidence. We are committed to making Scotland a carbon neutral and climate resilient nation with all the economic and benefits that brings. The Scottish Government is tackling climate disinformation by proactive public engagement and trusted, evidence-based communication on climate change. This includes our national network of community climate action hubs and our Climate Engagement Fund, and with enabling access to reliable sources of information supporting public understanding and collective climate action, we must and we will challenge climate deniers with the evidence.
Patrick Harvey.
I'm grateful for the answer, but this goes beyond one portfolio. We saw yesterday how online disinformation can very quickly lead to violence and far-right opportunism. We've also seen disinformation and conspiracy theories in relation to issues like vaccines, contraception, the treatment of minorities in our society and, as I say, the reboot and rebirth of climate denial, not just in online forms, but in the mainstream media as well. Will the Minister sit down across portfolio with other ministers and ensure that the Scottish Government develops a robust and comprehensive strategy to deal with disinformation and conspiracy theories across all topics?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I don't think there's any climate deniers in the Cabinet or in the ministerial team. I don't think there's any climate change deniers in my party. I know that the Green Party, obviously, I would say that mainly across this chamber, we do not have climate change deniers. In the last Parliament, I made the point of saying in that Parliament, I did not believe that we had climate change deniers. But in this Parliament, unfortunately, we do, and they can't take hold. And the way to combat climate change denial is to have facts at our fingertips, not just about the health benefits, the societal benefits, but also the amount of jobs that climate action takes, the opportunities that Scotland has for growth. We have the facts at our fingertips and we all must have a responsibility. But people need to speak out against those that would come away with ridiculous phrases like we heard in the last couple of days from Malcolm Offord, calling net zero net stupid zero. Well, that's not parliamentary language in my book, but it's also very childish and it flies in the face of the evidence and the facts.
Question 4, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you. to ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to address reported concerns that implementing recent Equalities and Human Rights Commission guidance on single-sex spaces will put at increased risk both transgender people and cisgender people who present in gender non-conforming ways.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The UK Government have now approved the EHRC's Code of Practice and laid it before the UK Parliament for 40 days of scrutiny before it comes into force. This is in line with the reserved powers within the Equality Act 2010. The Scottish Government officials are now undertaking a detailed analysis of the Code and its implications, including how it will affect service providers and the rights, safety and dignity of all individuals. The Code does not change the provisions of the Equality Act 2010. The Act continues to provide protections against discrimination, including for individuals on the basis of gender reassignment, and those protections remain in place. Transgender people are therefore protected in law, and any application of the Code must be consistent with those protections.
Maggie Chapman.
Organisations like the Equality Network and LGBT Youth Scotland have warned that implementing this guidance will inevitably require people to make assumptions about who is and who is not a woman based on appearance. This will set back equalities and human rights for everyone. Frontline staff may be expected to make judgments in everyday settings in our public services. Stakeholders argue the guidance is not only harmful but fundamentally unworkable. NHS boards, universities, councils, leisure providers have all expressed uncertainty. So what support is the Scottish Government providing to ensure public services are not drawn into costly disputes and inconsistent and discriminatory practices?
Minister Secretary.
Well, it is the EHRC that is the enforcer of the Equality Act, and it is for them to provide guidance, and in this case that has been provided to the UK Government and, as I said, is now before Parliament. I do recognise the point that Maggie Chapman has made about the very strongly held views on this guidance, and there is concern about the implications on services and individuals. The Scottish Government wrote to the UK Government in November 2025 raising points on, at that point, the draft code, and that did include the issue around social policing. So, as I said in my original answer, the Government is undertaking a detailed analysis. It is for other individuals and it is for other organisations to take their own legal advice. It is not for the Scottish Government to produce another code or guidance on this issue. But within our remit, and to ensure that we are complying with the law, we are undertaking that due diligence as members would expect.
Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Court of Session has just ruled against West Lothian Council in my region that providing multi-user unisex toilets in a primary school amounted to indirect sex discrimination against female pupils. So will the Scottish Government implement the EHRC guidance in full and without further delay, and ensure that they are working directly with councils so they are not falling foul of sex discrimination?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, if Megan Gallagher will forgive me, I think she is confusing two different pieces of legislation. The original question from Maggie Chapman was about the Equality Act 2010 and the guidance that follows from that, and there is an issue around regulations for the provision of facilities from schools, which there is the Scottish Government will undertake consultation on and look to update that in due course. And we will, of course, analyse very carefully the findings of the court decision that Megan Gallagher has referred to, which is a separate case to the EHRC guidance.
Question 5, Claire Hockey.
Ask the Scottish Government how it will support Police Scotland and local authorities to tackle youth disorder over the summer months.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to tackling all forms of antisocial behaviour and violence in our communities, and any disorder is not acceptable. While operational decisions are for the Chief Constable, the Scottish Government supports both Police Scotland and local authorities to take necessary action suitable for their own communities. I have noticed that in Ms Hockey's constituency, the community officers are being deployed to tackle youth disorder and target problem offenders. So we complement this work by investing in preventative approaches, including funding diversionary activities in every local authority area through Cashback for Communities, alongside targeted support for youth violence initiatives such as Medics Against Violence and No Knives, Better Lives.
Claire Hockey.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer, and I too commend the local police authorities in my Rutherglen and Cambuslang constituency for the work that they're doing. However, as the summer school holidays roll around, many people in my constituency will be concerned about the potential for youth disorder to occur, in particular in association with alcohol and underage drinking. How will the Cabinet Secretary ensure that local police teams and local authorities will have resources they need to tackle the issue, particularly over the summer months?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the concerns raised by Ms Hockey. Those are concerns shared by residents in my constituency, and I'm confident in Police Scotland tackling any such disorder whenever and wherever it occurs. How officers are deployed in any local area, including over the summer, is of course a matter for the Chief Constable, who has been clear that she intends to bring frontline policing to its strongest possible position. And I know, like me, she will meet her local policing teams regularly to seek that confidence locally. The Scottish Government is also investing in youth work and in diversion so that young people have positive alternatives through the school holidays, such as initiatives like Extra Time. And in addition, we're providing Police Scotland with record funding of more than £1.7 billion, which the Chief Constable has said will mean that she can maintain officer numbers at 16,500 in the coming year, and we continue to have more officers per head of population than in England and Wales.
Holly Bruce.
I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary would agree that given equity of access to long-term relational youth work in bespoke places, young people from all backgrounds will be better enabled to thrive and will negate the need to view young people as the problem. YouthLink Scotland's review of the SNP manifesto found key areas lacking. Can the CabSec confirm the SNP government will commit to fairly funding youth work with equality of access, regardless of postcode, and embed youth work in justice, education, health and anti-poverty strategies throughout the programme for government?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. There is a lot of work ongoing to support young people through the community and voluntary sector as we continue to invest in charities and social enterprises, and we have established our Fairer Funding two-year pilot, giving grants to community and voluntary organisations totalling over £130 million between 2025-26 and 26-27. So I'm confident that the ask that Holly Bruce is making is already underway.
Before moving to question 6, I remind members that in live criminal cases, the sub judice rule is engaged, and I therefore ask members not to comment on sentencing where it is still to take place.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what actions it will take to ensure clear and transparent sentencing.
Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, sentencing decisions in individual cases are a matter for the sentencing judge. The sentencing of offenders is usually announced orally in court, and the judge will often give reasons for imposing a particular sentence at the time of sentencing and may also publish a sentencing statement in certain cases of particular public interest or which raise wider issues. The Scottish Sentencing Council, which is a statutory independent advisory body, aims to promote greater public understanding of sentencing and has published a range of online information to help the public understand different aspects of sentencing.
Stephen Kerr.
Fundamentally, we in this Parliament decide and determine the law. And the reality is that Scotland's sentencing system is deliberately dishonest. Offenders can be released after serving just 50 or 40 or 30% of the sentence imposed. So put simply, sentencing often does not mean what it says, and the public get that. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree that prisoners should by default serve the sentence handed down by the court in full, by default?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Mr Kerr will know and understand, I am sure, that the custodial sentence imposed by the court is generally not the same as, say, the length of time a person will spend in custody. This does not mean the sentence has changed, but rather reflects that a sentence will last the length of time a court imposed, but it may be subject to enforcement both in custody and in the community. This is all long-standing as part of Scots law and how it operates and has operated under many different administrations with a lot of existing infrastructure, originally set in the mid-1990s by the then UK Government.
Paul McLennan.
Presiding Officer, as the efficient and fair function of Scotland's justice system is a priority for all in this chamber, does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me on the importance of our sentencing council and courts working independently to ensure this objective?
Yes, that is a fundamental principle of the rule of law within our country. The independence of the criminal courts is a vital feature of how justice is delivered, and one of the ways that the independent counsel, an independent counsel can assist with the operation of courts is through the production of sentencing guidelines covering particular types of offence, such as rape or categories of offender, which make clear the factors the sentencing judge is required to consider in determining the appropriate sentence. So these guidelines must be agreed by the High Court before they come into effect, and once in effect, the Court must have regard to any relevant guidance when sentencing.
Question 7, Alan Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent assessment is made of future journey times and cross-border services between Scotland and London once HS2 is operational, including how passenger service and demand will be affected.
Cabinet Secretary Stephen Flynn.
Presiding Officer, HS2 is one of the most delayed and over-budget projects ever. Unfortunately, that means that I can't provide Mr Brown with the journey time forecast he would like, but what I can do is say to him that I hope to return to the Chamber upon completion of the project in 2043 to advise him further.
Alan Brown.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. As he says, it's going to be nearly 20 years before HS2 is actually operational, but incredibly they've actually already placed orders for trains. And the problem is with these trains, it means fewer seats in cross-border services, it means journey times in the West Coast mainline section will take longer, and therefore people are actually going to have to pay more for the privilege of a worse service. And even worse, if these trains come in before HS2 is live, the journey times will be even longer than present, harming Scotland's economy. So what can be done to make sure we are not an afterthought?
Cabinet Secretary.
Unfortunately, Presiding Officer, I think Scotland's always an afterthought to Westminster politicians, but I do indeed share Mr Brown's concerns, and I will raise them as quickly as I possibly can with the relevant UK Government Minister.
Question 8, Laura Moody.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Stagecoach regarding the reported ongoing punctuality and cancellation issues affecting the X74 service between Dumfries and Glasgow, including regarding what steps are being taken to ensure value for money when services fall below acceptable reliability standards.
For her question, I can advise her that my officials are in regular contact with Stagecoach on a wide range of issues impacting the bus sector. But I must remind the Chamber that punctuality and reliability of individual services are a matter for the operator. The majority of bus services in Scotland operate in a deregulated market and must be registered with the Traffic Commissioner for Scotland. The Commissioner can determine if an operator is failing to run services in line with their registration and has the power to take action against any of them at that point.
Laura Moody.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Passengers left stranded in the middle of the night by a recent incident by Stagecoach included vulnerable young people, and they were given no information or support by the operator. Given the significant public subsidy that Stagecoach receives, will the Scottish Government accelerate its work to support greater public control of bus services, including franchising, so reliability and passenger safety come before private profit?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very disappointed to hear about the experience of those young people, and if Ms Moody would like to speak to me further in relation to that, I'd be more than happy to do so. With regards to franchising, this Government, obviously through the Transport Scotland Act 2019, has sought to empower local authorities in that regard, and we will invest £4 million in 2026-27 to support local authorities to build business cases in that regard.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Transport Secretary will be aware that people in Moffat and Dumfries are very concerned about the parlous state of bus services, particularly the X74. But last summer, the entire bus network across Dumfriesshire nearly fell apart when Stagecoach headed for the exit, and this is a legacy problem. So will the Minister now agree to meet with me to discuss my constituents' real concerns about how we get fair funding for rural bus services?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm of course happy to meet with the member, and I would certainly sympathise with the impact that it's had upon his constituents. Hopefully at the meeting we do have, he can then outline whether he supports franchising or not.
Question 9, Michael Mara.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on whether there should be parity of access to justice for all former patients affected by the actions of Sam El-Jamel, regardless of whether treatment was received through NHS Tayside or privately.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government expects any legal cases raised by former patients of LGML to be considered fairly and on a case-by-case basis. All claims brought by former patients will ultimately be determined by the courts. The judicial process in Scotland is independent. Ministers do not have the power to instruct private companies or entities in relation to their approach to litigation. However, Scottish courts have discretion to disapply the time bar where it is equitable to do so.
Michael Mara.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer and for her understanding of this issue. Clearly, the time bar was set aside by NHS Tayside. It's allowing victims now to have the chance of justice. Will the Cabinet Secretary meet with me, victims and Willie Rennie MSP to discuss how we can get to the bottom of the legal culpability of the private patients in this and to make sure that we can make the case to them that they should do the same, set the time bar aside and allow these patients who have suffered over a period of decades to access justice?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do very much appreciate the member's advocacy for the former patients of LGML. He does, of course, raise a point of principle that I'm sure the Chamber will understand. On behalf of the Scottish Government, I can say that we were very encouraged by NHS Tayside's decision in February of this year to reset the time bar for these former patients. It is, of course, for the independent care providers to determine whether or not to plead the time bar, but it is, of course, important that Mr Mara has had the opportunities today to put his concerns and his appeal on behalf of his constituents on the parliamentary record. In terms of the courts, as I indicated, they do retain discretion to set aside time limits where it is equitable to do so, ensuring cases can be considered fairly on their individual merits. And while I am limited in my powers in this regard, I do not think it will cause any harm to have a discussion with Mr Mara or Mr Rennie, as long as we are clear about the ministerial boundaries which I must adhere to.
Question 10, Ariane Burgess.
To ask the Scottish Minister, in light of the growing number of people swimming in Scotland's waters and the UK Government bringing forward a clean water bill, what consideration is being given to introducing equivalent legislation in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Scotland already has a legislative framework which supports improvements in the water environment. We have 90 sites that are designated as bathing waters, and last year 97% of those sites achieved the required bathing water standards. The Scottish Government is considering our water-related policies to ensure that they continue to meet the public's expectations and deliver adaptation to the growing impacts of drought and flooding arising from climate change. Our publicly owned water and wastewater services are funded by customers, with all profits going back into improvements in infrastructure.
Ariane Burgess.
My constituents in Tinnaburra want to swim in and restore the sea on their doorstep, but a broken sewage system is making the water too toxic to enter. Will the Minister agree to visit Tinnaburra with me to see the situation for herself and to commit to closing Scotland's sewage monitoring gap as a first step towards clean water legislation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I thank Ariane Burgess for that invitation. Like me, she probably takes to the open water ourselves, and obviously we need to make sure that before we go into the water that we check all the conditions through the SEPA website before we do so, because there are lots of ways in which the water can become unsafe, which aren't just related to anything to do with the wastewater system. Sites designated bathing waters where a large number of people are expected to bathe have regard for the past trends and infrastructure facilities provided. There's no statutory process for the designation of a new bathing water, and proposals are often made by local authorities. But in terms of our invitation to come to Tinnaburra, I'll consult with my private office and see if we can fit that in over the summer. It would be my pleasure.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The 2026 bathing season is indeed upon us. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of SEPA's proposals to close its network of live electronic signage, and instead of posting daily water quality predictions or pollution event warnings directly at beaches, it will instead rely on the use of a QR code and posters linking to the SEPA website. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concerns that this may well compromise accessible and clearly visible live public information at beach locations, which is a key statutory duty under the Bathing Water Scotland regulations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, indeed, and I thank Patricia Gibson for bringing up this issue, because we did talk about this informally, and as a result I did reach out to SEPA about their plans for the signage. Throughout the bathing water season, SEPA provides information on bathing water quality, short-term pollution incidents, dedicated bathing water quality on their website. But in addition, 30 out of Scotland's 90 bathing waters, they've installed and maintained electronic signs, as Patricia Gibson mentioned, which display information in real time on water quality. One of these signs, they have told me, at Saltcoats has been removed due to concerns about proximity to a cycle path, and I'd be willing to meet with Patricia Gibson to give her more detail on that particular incident, as I know that it affects her constituents.
Thank you. That concludes general questions, and apologies to those members I was unable to call.